Jon Hewitt is one of our co-hosts today from RMIT. He is a lecturer in RMIT School of Fashion and Textiles and is today's moderator for this panel. Jon Hewitt is a lecturer at RMIT School of Fashion and Textiles with over 15 years of industry experience within the fashion sector in design, PR management, wholesale and consultancy. Jon's academic research interests include the marketing practices of social enterprises based in the fashion sector, marketing sustainable fashion and consumer behaviour. His most recent published work is Fashionable Altruism, the marketing of fashion-based social enterprise, published in Social Enterprise Journal in 2024. So please, big round of applause, Jon Hewitt, who will then introduce the rest of our panel.
I'm always worried that I have like a magnetic field that disables all technology when I get close to it. So thankfully, this seems to be working. Thanks everyone for joining us for what I think will be a insightful and thought-provoking conversation we're going to have about social enterprises operating within the creative industries. The reason I kind of wanted to put this panel together is because I think often when we have a look at social enterprises, we often look at them as a kind of a broad business model and maybe don't pay enough focus to the influence of the sectors that they actually operate within. And I think that's something we maybe need to look at a little bit more closely at. So we put together this panel, and I think really regardless of the creative industries, whether it be like fashion or jewellery or accessories or homewares, these social enterprises are not only contributing or providing innovative and unique products to the market, but also actually really, really contributing meaningful social impact as well. So we've got a great panel that we've got together, which I will just do the introductions. We have Llawella Forrest here. Llawella is the General Manager of the Purpose Precinct. I presume everyone's familiar with the Purpose Precinct. If not, please do go down to the Queen Victoria Markets and check it out. It's a really, really fabulous initiative. Really the first of its kind. It's aimed at supporting, growing and activating Victoria's social enterprise sector, bringing together products and services that embody a commitment to a fairer and more sustainable world. We then have Shehreen Ahmed. Shehreen is the founder of 71 Bay. Shehreen draws inspiration from her Bangladeshi heritage, channeling it into a fabulous selection of homewares. Shehreen is also in the pop-up store downstairs. I'm obsessed with the lampshade that's down there at the moment. Creating products that connect consumers with the artisans and the communities who create them. We then have Prue McMillan, who is the founder of Community Projects Worldwide. Prue has over 25 years of experience in fair trade, empowering marginalised communities globally by bringing their handcrafted products to the Australian market. And then finally, we have Nick Savaidis. Nick is the founder of Etiko, an ethical fashion brand pioneering fair trade, transparency, and sustainability. Nick is known for his unwavering commitment to social justice within the fashion and apparel sector. Very much so. All right, well, I think just to get started, maybe if we can go through, and if each of you can maybe briefly share what inspired you to start a social enterprise within these creative industries, or I guess, Llawella, in your case, kind of like a cooperative of social enterprises that kind of crosses across these creative industries. I can start with you.
Check 1, 2.
Oh.
Right, that's it. Hi. I suppose just for some context, for those that may not be familiar with the Purpose Precinct, so it's a social enterprise marketplace based at the Queen Victoria Markets, also online, but there's a number of different elements that sort of bring that to play, but a key element of that is to build a thriving social enterprise sector. And I suppose to your point, Jon, the reason why that's been created is that there was a need to kind of have a centralised location, an aggregated place where people can shop for purpose, be conscious and ethical shoppers. But there's also an underpinning of various other initiatives that we can go into through the course of this conversation, which aim to support various aspects of that. I suppose for me, I've been involved in social enterprise for quite a while, and this initiative was attractive to me because it is the first of its kind in Australia. There is no other place that's creating the initiatives that we're currently doing. And so when you come into our space, it's pretty magical. You know, you've got staff there that are really passionate about sharing the storytelling of the various social enterprise brands that we have in the space. So that's probably the key kind of driver for me.
So, and you've had some expansion recently, is that correct? I think you've now got the social studio involved as well.
Yeah, so it's an ever evolving space. So at the Queen Victoria Market, we've got 7 different shop fronts. And within those shop fronts, we've got a variety of social enterprises activating and being a part of that initiative. So at the moment, we've got the Social Studio, which is a social enterprise that supports the BIPOC community in fashion and textiles, manufacturing and jobs and business creation. We've got a Moving Feast Kitchen, which looks at the food waste streams at the Queen Victoria Market, which are huge, and how we actually utilise that rescued produce to create products on site. We also have a social enterprise cafe Street, which many of you may be very familiar with, that's operating on site as well. So Street and Good Cycles, which is another social enterprise that works with young people finding sort of just meaningful employment for those that find barriers to employment through various channels in relation to bikes, so using bikes as a conduit. So those 2 founding social enterprises, as well as the Social Enterprise Network of Victoria, and some grateful grant support from the Victorian government, have helped to create that space.
Such an inspiring initiative. Shehreen, what brought you to this this kind of space of social enterprise?
To talk.
Oh, yeah,
Hello.
you're live.
So what inspired me was actually quite personal. So I moved to Melbourne when I was 8 months pregnant in 2012, and my background's in architecture, and I felt previously I was quite connected with like the creative scenes back in Bangladesh. And I felt quite disconnected, which if someone's relocated to somewhere, you might be familiar with that feeling. And while it was this beautiful, time of joy and just exploring this new country that we were going to call home, it just seemed like Bangladesh was like an old lover, like calling out to me, not to be forgotten. So I kind of wanted to channel that energy, into something more positive. And that's when I've always loved crafts. I've grown up in Dhaka in Bangladesh, and crafts were kind of part of our, like, embedded in our daily life. So whether it was for aesthetic purposes, like something beautiful to decorate the home, or, useful functional things around the house. So it just seemed like a natural kind of pathway to take when wanting to, do something creative with myself, or having like a creative venture of my own. Through 71 Bay, we support women in rural areas in Bangladesh with our jute wares. So this helps to curb displacement into the city, allowing our women artisans to work from their homes, around their communities and families, and craft everything, staying on their land instead of having to be displaced. We also work with katha wares, which are recycled and reclaimed sari fabrics. And those are made by a different group of artisans who are actually based in Dhaka city. They were at risk of trafficking, or having, have escaped that and been rehabilitated. So it's a wonderful sort of 2 groups of, Bangladeshi women that I'm able to support. And I guess our sort of mission was to create, to be more focused on trade rather than aid, and just help heads to be held up high, and for people to be, feeling empowered through meaningful, employment opportunities.
And with your the product range, is it a kind of a collaborative process in terms of the design? Because there's quite a cohesive look across your range.
So with my jute products, they're designed by me primarily, but then I work with my artisans back home to create them. They're handcrafted by them. With my katha products, which is supporting the women in the cities, I do not design those. That is more that I buy from them. It is all recycled and reclaimed, so it's what's available at the market at the time. Yeah. So,
Fantastic. Ruth, over to you.
Oh, testing. After working in tourism for about 10 years in Africa and Australia and Papua New Guinea, my husband and I decided that we'd open an African shop to keep connection with places that we've been. And this was 25 years ago. And early on, we were introduced to a group of ladies in Soweto that were pensioners that would get together and chat and make these beautiful goodwill dolls, which we ended up calling them. They asked if we would sell them in Australia for them, and they weren't commercially viable. The money that they were wanting for them, they would never sell in Australia for the price that they would need to cover their importation and the logistics. But we didn't want to say no. So we actually, there was a pivot point for us. We actually stopped and thought, why don't we take this product on as a goodwill project? We make no profit on it at all. We bring it into Australia and then we present it to our wholesale customers, because at that time we were wholesaling and selling to shops all around Australia. We tell everybody about the project. We tell them who makes it, why they do it, and what benefits they're getting from it. And our customers loved it. We asked them, would they consider to sell the dolls with no margin either? So get it right from the maker, right to the end person at zero cost, with everybody absorbing those costs. And they did. And we gave out all information to them, and then they had a lovely talking point to their customers about how they were becoming involved in this social group. And over the years, we've sold thousands of these dolls for this group of ladies in Soweto. From that point, they then, with the merchandising material that we made for them, which was just a card and information for our customers, they then took it to their people in South Africa and created jobs for themselves. They then got uniform contracts, and it's become a really great little industry for them. And that was just the one point where we thought, all our customers really would love to know the backstory to the products. They'd like to know that they're contributing along the way to the wellbeing of communities and small groups. And so then we focused our whole business around that. So when we sell products, we have stories about the artisans. We visit all the artisans. We know that things are being made under fair trade principles. We know where the money's going back to, and it's a very rewarding business to be involved with. It's nice to be able to be called a social enterprise now. Back in 25 years ago, that phrase really wasn't around. Everybody expected you to be a charity, which is very hard to be when it's just a couple that are wanting to try and make a bit of a change. So now with everybody starting to understand fair trade and social enterprise more, it's a nice way that they get what you're doing. And it's amazing how many people want to be involved if they have the opportunity. A lot of people don't feel like they can make a change, but, as we say, just by buying consciously, you can make a change to the world. So ours is empowerment through employment. So everybody has their own businesses, and then we represent them in Australia and bring their products over.
And Prue has a pop-up downstairs as well for you to check out. And you're repping your brand very well with these fabulous earrings as well in the set. Nick, can you talk us through how you came to Etiko?
Sure. Can you hear me? Okay. So Etiko is a small fashion label based in Baronia at the moment. And it's a street fashion brand for people who give a shit about their fellow human beings, the environment, and animals. So we're part of the fair trade system, the flow system. So our entire supply chain is certified fair trade. We work with manufacturers in Pakistan, India, and Sri Lanka. We primarily work with a farmer-owned cooperative called the Chetna Organic Farmer Cooperative based in central India. And when we started working with them, there was about 270 farmers in the cooperative. Now there's nearly 7,000 in the co-op. And they actually own a share in the factory that makes the clothing that we sell. So the business is made up of 50%. We sell directly to consumers around the world, though the bulk of our market is Australia. But we've got customers in the United States, Europe, who buy from us regularly. but we also help organisations, political groups, universities, schools, apply sustainability and social impact to their procurement of clothing, uniforms, branded merchandise. Been doing this for a few years. Last year, we actually were awarded the best all-round sustainable retailer award at the National Online Retailers Awards. And back in 2016, we became the only fashion brand to ever win an Australian Human Rights Award for our work in addressing exploitation in supply chains. The reality is it's a big challenge, despite the good that we're kind of doing. I'll talk about the challenges later, but I've been working in the social enterprise space before I even heard of the term social enterprise, thanks to Sharon, the previous presenter. I actually started, I'm a teacher by trade, but during the late 1980s, early 90s, I worked on remote Indigenous communities in Central Australia, and I was meant to be running literacy and numeracy programs in a place called Yuendamu, which is 300 kilometres northwest of Alice Springs, but I was servicing communities as far as the Western Australian border. But when I started running these programs, people said, what's the point? There's no jobs on the communities, so why would we need literacy and numeracy? So we started looking at what opportunities there were for setting up businesses on remote communities. And I spent 6 years doing that. We set up everything from a community laundromat, which cost about $10,000, $20,000 to set up, to a video conferencing network, which cost millions of dollars. But they were all community-owned businesses that I was seconded to help set up. And it's been a kind of interesting kind of journey. And now nearly 30 years later, still working in that kind of space, but running my own social enterprise.
Fantastic. I suppose what I'd like to hear about next is in terms of when it comes to building these kind of long-term relationships, whether it be with textile producers or with the artisans themselves, maybe their broader communities as well. How have you kind of established those relationships, and what influence has that maybe had on not only your own organisation, but perhaps those communities as well? Shehreen, start with you.
I'm partnered with fair trade organizations, NGOs based in Bangladesh. So they've been operating since Bangladesh became an independent country in 1971. So in having those relationships and just starting my own sort of venture, which is a one-woman show here right now, it's actually made the process really, really simplified in a way for me, because they're registered with the Fair Trade Organization. And because I'm from Bangladesh, I have that bit of an advantage in that, I do visit regularly. I do speak the language. I'm able to communicate with our artisans, meet with them, sit with them, and, really spend time with them. Some of the stories that I hear, and it's just, I guess, but I think we'll come to that later, but the storytelling bit of it, I focus on more sort of like the telling the stories in a respectful, uplifting kind of way. One of the things that always will stay with me is one of these stories I heard in my last visit, where one of my artisans, who is in her 60s now, she's been working with this NGO for over 30 years. She's trained her daughter-in-law, and she told me that her husband, who's in his 70s now, sometimes cooks. And in a village setting, in a country like Bangladesh, where it's traditionally quite patriarchal, that is massive. So just being connected to those stories and these organizations, I guess, helps build up my resilience as well. And I'm not sure if I've sort of gone away from what
I think you've touched on something really interesting there as well, though, that idea of that you're not an outsider going into these communities, that you automatically have that kind of connection.
Yes, but in living in Australia as well, it's also like I'm neither here nor there. Like I'm not true there, and I don't belong completely here either at times. But yes, it has it is definitely so much more sort of simplified just because I am from there. And I realize all the challenges that people face when, they're working with other communities overseas and things like that. But yeah.
Now, Llawella, in terms of, because you've got such a broad range of social enterprise under you and such, a broad range of social missions as well in terms of the beneficiaries, what are your thoughts on in terms of how those relationships are built?
Yeah, so the way we have social enterprise coming into the Purpose Precinct, so I've got over 80 now that are represented across the multiple shops. They either come through Social Enterprise Network of Victoria. We engage with social traders to make sure they're certified. We also see if they're People of Planet First certified. So there's certification channels that can help us to identify those social enterprises, because it's really important for us that they're legit. No greenwashing or social washing on our watch. We're actually about being, completely genuine and transparent in that every single brand that's in our stores lives and breathes what they say they do. And we also identify social enterprises. So quite often, social enterprise doesn't necessarily need to be a charitable organisation. They could be a for-profit, but contributing 50% or more of their profits to their particular mission or cause. So often a lot of the charitable organisations kind of don't realise that they're a social enterprise. So we let them know that they actually fit that definition and that we'd love to welcome them into the store. So for us, it's just, the identification process, making sure that their products are fit for purpose. So, we need to make sure that we're leaning into a level of quality that we think is going to retail well. And then it's just us, continuing those relationships with suppliers. So it's a bit of a different relationship, I think, to the suppliers that I think most of you would have here.
But you do also have, the staff working in the actual retail outlet are beneficiaries as well. It's part of the work.
Yeah, that's right.
Integrated.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So one of our key focuses is that it's a jobs precinct. So through Street, Good Cycles, Social Studios, Green Collect, who also had a pop-up in our space, they each have their own employment or training pathways as part of their own social enterprise business model. So every single person that works or is training in our spaces does have barriers to obtaining work. So over the past 2 years, we've been able to employ or support the training pathways of 75 young people. That's front of house as well as back of house across our retail and food stores. And so those young people play a really critical role in having lived experience and can really relate to a number of the social enterprises that they're in charge of selling in store, but are really amazing ambassadors for each of those social enterprises because they know them like the back of their hand and they're representing them in that context of the store.
Yeah, I must say I was shopping in there actually just last weekend, and the
street shopping.
Well, the kind of the spiel I got on the product range was fantastic. Like really knew their stuff, which was great.
Yeah, they're very they have a great deal of ownership.
Yeah.
In sharing those stories.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and it definitely helped create a greater connection with the actual product than I would traditionally find in a retail space.
Good feedback. I'll pass that on.
Yes. Now, Prue, I know you have some really great experiences and stories in terms of the artisans that you deal with. Can you talk us through what was maybe the first kind of artisan that you brought on board?
Well, beside our Soweto ladies, our Goodwill ladies, we also met another gentleman called Givemore.
Mm-hmm.
His family is Givemore, Luckmore and Patience. And he started as a street vendor. He's been supplying beautiful beadwork to us for now 25 years. We were speaking to him last year when we went over to South Africa, and he was saying, his youngest daughter, has decided she's at university now and she's studying something on ships, so she's going on boats. Anyway, she's studying to be a marine biologist, which is very ironic because our daughter, who's 19, who was in a baby bunting when we went and first met him, was interested in studying marine biology. And that's a huge generational change within, a small community. We have groups that have 3 generations of people working within that space, generally in really remote areas where the grandmothers have been able to get their daughters and even the grandchildren learning the traditional skills, getting education, getting just that generational change is huge. And all of that comes through sustainability. Our business has to be sustainable. So it's no point just going in and buying from somebody for one shipment, selling it and see you later. Generally, it's something that we, will buy 3 or 4 times a year from people. They know they have to provide really good quality products. They have to keep creating new ideas. We don't manufacture. It's all their work. It's all their business. But it gives them, oops, did I turn up? Yep, no. What it does is it gives them a future to plan for. You can't put your child into a school knowing the school fees are going to be a certain amount of money for one term. But you know that if you've got an ongoing income, no matter where you live, you can afford to educate your children and give them opportunities and feed your children and buy a home with sustainable continued purchases. And I think that's a really, for us, it's a very personal thing. We don't speak the language, but fortunately it was English anyway. But we have people come to us now over such a long period of time. So it's very nice to go back to the communities to see just what's changed and how grateful anybody is for the opportunity to be able to have just the basic things of educating their children, having enough food to eat, potentially owning or striving to own their own home. It's really rewarding.
Yeah, seeing that actual on the ground impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. We're in Mozambique one time, probably 18, 19 years ago, and with 8 artisans going around and seeing different groups. And they were just saying how it's impossible for the education for the young kids. They used to collect dirty lolly wrappers and make them into jewellery, clean it and make it into jewellery, which is really quite beautiful. But I said to them, how much does it cost to educate a child for 1 year at school? And it was $35. That most people couldn't afford that. That's not high on their priority. That's how close to the bone things are. And it's nice to know that you can't help everybody, unfortunately. That's just the way it is. But there's always some way to go forward. You just got to find a way.
Nick, can you talk us through, I suppose not artisans as much, but in terms of, the farmers and the textile producers that you deal with, how are those relationships built?
Well, it's the exploitation of workers in fashion supply chains is no great secret. I mean, it was happening 20 years ago and it's still happening now. This does my head in that we know about this, but fast fashion still contributes to the exploitation of workers and farmers in developing countries. I've been working within the fair trade flow system for 20 years now, and we were the first non-food company to be certified fair trade, which has made it difficult, but it's also made it a bit easy because there aren't that many certified fair trade suppliers. So I've only ever worked with one farmer cooperative who supplies the raw materials that goes into our products. That's the General Organic Farmer Cooperative. I've only ever worked with one factory that makes the clothing, one factory that makes our sneakers, and one factory that makes our flip-flops or thongs. So I've had long-term relationships with all my suppliers. Within the fashion industry, it's quite common for brands to work with one supplier each season. They play one supplier off against another. I think Kmart, for example, has about 600 different suppliers in the fashion kind of space, and they're playing them off against each other all the time. Within the fair trade system, we don't do that. We're committed to working with the same suppliers, even when they do stuff up, which happens to occasionally. And over the years, I've got to know quite a few of the workers in the factories, because what we find is that the workers appreciate the environment where they're working in and they tend to stay there. in the factory that makes our clothing, the average worker's been there for 14 years. With the farmers that we supply our raw materials from, it's gone from 270 farmers when I started working with them to about 7,000 in the cooperative. So there's obviously some kind of benefits to they're going to see it. So when I mentioned to you before, I've worked with the Indigenous communities for quite a few years in the early days. And one thing I did notice was that there's always kind of you white fellas coming into remote communities with the best intentions and giving their pushing their agenda or their ideas. And I was guilty of doing that when I worked on remote communities myself. And of course, some of those ideas that I had kind of fell apart after I left. So I learned from that experience and by following what the community wants. So we pay fair trade premiums which go into community development. And in the past, I suppose I would have said, this is what we should do. Let's do this, let's do that. No, I've learned to shut up and let the community decide what to do. And as a result, those projects tend to last a lot longer. So in the past, with our workers in the factories that make our sneakers, the fair trade premiums were pre-COVID were used to set up microcredit programs where the workers could actually borrow money to set up their own businesses to support their families. I like the idea, and up until COVID, we funded about 37 different businesses through the premiums that we paid, and then the community decided because of COVID that they had to focus on health and the education of their kids. So they decided that. Now, I was a bit disappointed that the microcredit program was stopped, but it was their decision. So I respected that. So I've learned to basically let the communities I work with make the decisions. I'm not into the whole white saviour approach to social enterprise. It's letting the community decide what they want.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really important point that you've touched on there. That kind of moving away from that top-down approach to development is a really, really important shift.
I see the workers and the farmers I work with as partners in my business.
Yeah.
And that's why we've worked with them for 15, 20 years now.
Absolutely. Now, you also touched on something that I think is particularly relevant here with your comment on fast fashion. Now, I do think obviously what we're doing here, in social enterprise within the creative industries is, aligning a creative product, whether that be, jewellery, accessories, homewares, whatever, with a social mission of some kind. I'm curious as to how you guys are kind of navigating aligning the social mission, but with a product that actually has a consumer market at a price point that is competitive, considering that the industry, particularly over the last 20 years, has now become this race to the bottom. Who can provide something at the cheapest possible price. We do obviously still have the very, very high end, but that that race to provide cheaper and cheaper prices is quite pervasive, I think, throughout the industry. So I'm curious, Llawella, can you speak to how do you guys kind of approach that when it comes to providing products for their market?
Yeah, I suppose we've got quite a finite group of businesses that we work with. So they've got to fit some particular criteria. So they need to be Victorian and they need to be social enterprises. So particularly in the fashion space, I think in our stores we've got maybe 10 brands that kind of fit that category. And, I haven't done any delving into why that might be the case, but, having a social enterprise that's fashion forward, that has to deal with those complexities around meeting demand, ensuring that you're sustainable, having things at a price point, it's a complex challenge. There are two brands in particular that do very well in our stores. One of those is Clothing the Gaps. The other one's Homey. And I think they're probably getting that balance right. And I'm speaking on their behalf, so please don't quote me. It might be a different situation underneath the bonnet. But I think the reason why they're successful is that their mission is clear. They're creating really fantastic designs. They're bringing out a couple of releases a year, although I think Homey's feeling the pressure to kind of do more sort of releases every year. And their storytelling is on point. Their pricing is on the higher end, but I think they're able to deliver on that through those aspects that I mentioned earlier. But yeah, it's a continual challenge in terms of how to manage all of that. I think those two brands in particular are doing a really good job, and we see that through our sales.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're kind of talking over it's all about really branding there in terms of being able to position it at that right point within the market.
And certainly at the market, we've got a really diverse set of customers. The Queen Victoria market has a very large percentage of international tourists that come along. There's the local shoppers that are shopping for their fruit and produce. There's a lot of interstate and intrastate visitors. The market is, fairly well known as a place for cheap stuff. So we're kind of we're in a sea of quality, I suppose, in the centre of the market. So, there's definitely a hurdle that we need to tackle every day in terms of contextualising the price points that we're needing to charge versus, the Nirvana t-shirt that's down the road that they're selling for $10 that they shipped in on 5 shipping containers from somewhere that's probably got, dubious manufacturing practices. So I think for us, it's going to be a bit of a slow burn looking at the environment within which we're in. So I think there's definitely that education piece, and the storytelling piece is key to get people over the line to be purchasing at those price points.
And I mean, that also ties back to what I was saying before in terms of the retail experience itself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in store, as storytelling, we have sort of storytelling cards of every single social enterprise, so people can understand what their mission is and what they're trying to achieve. Our staff spend a lot of time with customers to take them through that, and whilst that might feel like quite a lot of resource, it's actually part of their building their confidence. So it's actually part of their learning to be socialising, to be engaging with customers, to be able to distill messages. And to make it a joyous experience on the floor. And we're also in the process, we've recently launched what we're calling our impact calculator, which aggregates all the sales across the Purpose Precinct across a couple of key metrics. So you can go onto our website and see how you're contributing to that sort of aggregated good. So we're trying to sort of activate a number of different levers in that storytelling space to kind of justify the price points and the quality of what we're offering.
Absolutely. Now, Shehreen, I mean, we talk about fast fashion a lot. Homewares somehow managed to slide under the radar, but I think it's pretty similar in the sense that, there's cheaper and cheaper homewares available in very much the same way as fast fashion, but they've kind of maybe avoided some of the scrutiny that the fashion industry has gotten. But still, I would imagine it's the same challenge for you in terms of trying to find how do you hit that sweet market spot.
Yeah, so hello. So that's something, to be honest, I'm still, working through. For example, with our Katha wares, which are the recycled sari throws and like blankets, light blankets, it takes obviously a long time to layer up saris, to stitch them. And I found that they resonate well with a very niche market who actually have some, education, or they know about the history of kathas and the process of making kathas. So katha started out, katha means patched cloths, and it started out from need, from poor women who could not afford blankets, or poor families who couldn't afford blankets, and the woman would use their old sari. So generations of, women coming together in the community, using all of their old saris to sit together and stitch together. So it was also in the late afternoon sort of an activity for women in the community after the housework has been done to sit together and stitch and connect or share stories about their days or lives. And then it became more elaborate. Like they started doing silk ones as gifts for weddings, or very fine natural cotton ones for as baby blankets, etc. So those who know that story and resonate well, which is a very niche market I've found over here, and each katha takes a long time, so the price point is quite on the higher side of kathas, and I have struggled in the recent years to support these group of artisans as much as I would like to. So in my mind, what I'm trialing now is trying to simplify my processes. So, for example, I've been working with the NGOs on, say, certain colorways, which I feel like might resonate well or better over here, or setting up a pre-order kind of system, with my customers or things like that. But still working through that place, to be honest. With my jute products, again, I've tried to simplify it. So you'll see that there is very little use of color. So, for example, just being from that creative industry, and just with all those trending, things that are fast come and fast go kind of things, I've tried to simplify. Hello. Yes. Just using minimal color, for example, one of the reasons was that we were still trialing vegetable dye for jute fibers, but it also kind of takes me away from that whole trending, colorful, like very fast, this is the season, at least in the color sort of trend forecast kind of thing, and just places me elsewhere in the market. And in my head, it just simplifies the process because, again, like just being me here, while I do have all of these incredible artisans crafting our products, it was just too much to sort of handle. So that's how I've tried to curb that. Because with the fast sort of homewares, I see that it does follow trends, and whatever is forecasted or, is shared, and, influencers are doing all of their things and things like that. So I've just tried to move away from that.
Mhm.
In my head, it just simplifies it.
And I guess this is going to be one of the challenges or struggles in general, particularly if you're, dealing with kind of traditional or just labor-intensive artisanal techniques, is that the price just automatically goes up, obviously.
Yeah. So again, as you were saying, like just the storytelling. So I've, been able to spend time with them. So I've, written up, their what we've spoken about, and just so to educate myself as well, because to be honest, like I'm fairly new in this space. My background was architecture, and so just to educate myself as well, and that's a process too. So storytelling, just knowing about my artisans, knowing about their lives, knowing about their families. I've been fortunate to be able to travel with someone who's done my videos and things like that. So having all of that, and then you can refer back to it and really give people or customers a visual of how it happens and that backstory, which I think resonates really, really well. Because often I think a lot of people cannot visualize it either, So, yeah, so when I say like, women coming together in the late afternoon, sitting in the courtyard, which is called an utan, which is a traditional sort of Indian subcontinent architectural, feature, and coming together in those spaces and having those videos has really helped me.
Absolutely. True. Now, you were mentioning particularly artisanal like beading. How have you found ways to, because that obviously can be quite labor intensive at times as well. So how have you navigated finding that price point that works for you?
We with the price points, it's a really tricky one. We're based in Yamundi, up at the Yamundi markets, and we'll see over 1 million tourists for the year. And so we get exposed to a wide range of people. Being a market as well, people are looking for a very cheap price. We find that when we work with when we find the groups, we choose the products that we think will best sell in our market. And that will be different to what someone would buy from America or Paris or different places. It's always a challenge to try and get them to understand that Australia is a fairly small market with many fewer consumers and people willing to spend lots of money. We made a decision early on that we would prefer to sell a lot of products for a smaller amount of margin rather than a few products for a great margin, and make the products accessible to the vast majority of the population. We also, with designs, we don't manufacture, but we will give advice on which colours are popular for this season. So at the moment, you've got your really bright rainbows. We've got pinks and oranges going together, lovely blues. Most people's favourite colour is blue. So we know from our experience which is the more popular colourways to use and probably the ceiling point that people are happily going to spend money on. It's just a shame that with the fast fashion that, my son, when he was only 4 and just learned how to read, he said to me, "Why is everything made in China? Everything has a made in China tag." It's like, well, no, come into our shop. That's completely the opposite. And I think things are changing. We've just bought in a shipment of baskets from Senegal, which have been copied, unfortunately, in Asia, and you'll see them as Senegal hampers. But our baskets, which came from a tree in Senegal, are selling for the same price as these other ones. Now, if I'm going to be buying a basket from Senegal that looks like a Senegal basket, I would like it to come from Senegal. And I think people are like that. We have people come through and say, we are cheaper than what they could have bought that product in Johannesburg. So people need to look at something and not think, wow, that's expensive. They need to look at something that's cheap and think, why is that so cheap? Who is being paid? Who gets the money along here to buy a $5 T-shirt? Like, that's the way that the thinking needs to change. Not why is this so expensive? You can see why things are expensive. They've been made well with quality products.
Yes.
Why is this so cheap?
A fundamental shift needs to take place. Yeah, being able to buy a garment for less than a box of tissues is a concern.
Absolutely.
100%. Nick, how do you find this, kind of trying to find that price point?
It's been a real challenge to get the price right. For example, the sneakers that I'm wearing, Etiko sneakers, look remarkably similar to our well-known sneaker brand, which sells for $135 to $150. It costs us 200% more to make these sneakers than what the other company pays for theirs. But there's no way I could sell them for 200% more than what the other brand sells for. So I sell them at the same price, which means I don't have a huge amount of money to spend on marketing. I don't have the money to employ a large number of staff. So it's made a real challenge. But I've never felt comfortable with ethical fashion being a middle-class luxury. Now, one of the challenges we've got is if I ask everyone in this room who's opposed to the use of child labour, sweatshop and slave labour, you're all going to put your hands up. Is that correct? Yep. That'd be great. But the reality is every single person in this room right now is wearing something made in a sweatshop, potentially with child labour, potentially with slave labour. If it's made from cotton, you've got a high-risk garment product on you. And if it's not made out of cotton, and if it's made out of polyester, you're stuffing up the environment. We're all stuffing up the environment. So that's the other challenge we've got is the pricing, but also the contradiction between what we say that we believe in and what we do. Just recently, we were asked to quote on the supply of 8,000 hoodies for one of the universities. And that particular university has got a unit which is compulsory, a unit on sustainability which is compulsory for each student in that program. And we were asked to quote on the supply of those the hoodies. So we were offered them a garment which was 100% organic cotton, made in a fair trade certified factory. And given the university is committed to sustainability, it's got a whole sustainability team. They've got commitments to social procurement. We didn't get the job. And you can ask yourself, so it must have been the price. And it was the price. And what do you think would be a fair difference to pay for an ethical garment as opposed to your traditional cheap, nasty sweatshop-made garment? what would be a fair difference? Any suggestions? Yep.
Prices were right.
10%. Yeah.
So first
So
then that. You know what I mean?
it was a free, the university was going to give it to the students for free as part of their course, and they.
Yeah.
I don't know what this course is,
Yeah.
but this is rampant across the university sector. The disconnection between what organisations say they believe in and what they do when it comes to the crunch it just does my head in. So we can talk about social enterprise, we can talk about circularity, you can talk about sustainability till the cows come home. The reality is nothing's going to change until people who talk about it start doing it. I mean, you've heard the expression, talk is cheap. Well, it is. Yeah.
I mean, I think you'll probably find that's quite endemic across many industries beyond university as well. I mean,
Well, we leading big parties, you'd be amazed by actually sustainability groups. I've been amazed by how many sustainability groups don't actually think about their own procurement. They say the government should do this and people, whatever, should do that, but they don't actually think about their own choices. I was asked to give a talk a while ago to the Socialist Alliance about my work with worker cooperatives and farmer cooperatives. And I gave them examples of what I was doing, and it was like, revolution, that's the way it should be. But then we looked at their merchandise, and it was all sweatshop made. And I said, do you see the disconnection? They said, but our supporters don't want to spend more than $20 on a T-shirt. I thought, well, that's why sweatshops exist, because people aren't prepared to pay the true cost of their whatever they buy, whether it's decorations or homewares or clothing. So I find this whole social enterprise movement, sustainability movement, circularity movement, kind of interesting because I just see so much green and ethical washing going on, and someone's got to challenge that. I was hoping this group might be the start.
It's definitely a complex terrain to navigate, for sure. I'm just mindful of the time, so I was thinking it might be an idea to throw it over to you guys, maybe for some questions. Any questions from anyone in the audience? I feel like there was.
Right. But they could. They have been
Sorry. Hello. Sorry. Yeah, so I started this business 4 years ago to try to find solution for kids' clothing, which is very disposable. They dispose it every 3 months because kids grow fast. So I found a problem. I may start making adjustable clothing. But then when I started the business, I decided that I really wanted to have strong pillars. So sustainability was one. Organic natural fibers, use only organic and no chemicals, materials with no chemicals, and then social responsibility and all of that. It's the price point. It's been very challenging because at the moment I can only cover the cost of the manufacturing materials and very little I don't get any profit at the moment because, of course, people won't pay much money for kids' clothing. But then they do because it's adjustable, so they are able to fit it for longer. So in some way, yes, some people will buy it. But then, price point is one issue. But more than a question is an advice for you guys that have been in business for longer. What would be an advice that you would give me as an entrepreneur and trying to make things right from day one and trying to get into the market?
Okay.
Thanks.
There's probably a few ideas, but one thing that we've done with Etiko is build our own community. So we've got a newsletter database of 27,000 people now who support us ongoing. And I built that community by attending festivals, events, doing presentations, and getting people to sign up for our newsletters. So I know now that every month that we're going to have a certain amount of money coming in. So yeah, find your own community and get them to appreciate what you're doing and support you ongoing. So, I mean, there will be a niche market out there. It's just finding that audience. Yeah.
Prue, any advice?
Yeah, it is a tough one because price is just so important, and the cost of living affects everybody, and it affects the people that are making the products more than it is affecting us. I agree with Nick. Start to create a database of your own customers if you can, because someone once told me you're better off to sell 80% more to your 20% of your customers than 20% of 80% of your customers. They're your loyal people that will follow you. Something that I'm particularly bad with is social media. And really, to me, that looks like we're talking about innovation here. Bricks and mortar is pretty tough. You've got so many expenses with rent and wages, etc. That's not going to change. But social media, if you can garner a social media presence and let people know what you're doing and tell your story in a way, I think that's just, nothing is well, for me, 25 years, nothing's an overnight success, but it lasts a long time if you do it right and if you look after people. And that's how we've built.
I mean, I think that's a really important point, that the social media idea, obviously that's just another tool to be able to actually engage in this kind of, brand storytelling that seems to be so important for communicating, the benefits of these products to consumers. Any advice for someone starting out?
I think just getting really tight on who your key target customer is really critical, because there's so many elements there that you need to tap into their psyche. Where were you 12 years ago when I had my child and I was so frustrated that I was having to buy all these clothes? I was asking for exactly that. And I think social media is great, but that's a hard slog as well. It's hard to kind of get that right and really align that with your target demographic. And I hate to say the word influencer because it just makes me want to crawl under a table. But if you could find someone who aligns with your values and has visibility, you just need one of them that has a strong social media presence that really gravitates to your mission and what you're trying to do. You just need one to just start to spin stuff off. So, then that's kind of who your kind of key customer target is essentially.
Which, can I just say, that's a really great suggestion, because I sit back thinking, I don't want to spend my life in front of the camera telling my stories and keeping up with all the latest AI and all the rest of it. You just don't have enough time in the day. And then next month it changes. You've got to start again. But finding an influencer that is willing to promote for you, that is their life. That's what they do. I've never considered that. Anyone know? Come talk to me.
Unfortunately, that's become its own industry now. So, a lot of them are charging a lot of money. But, I think because you've got, if you can find someone that's not their motivation, like getting paid to promote your product is not their motivation. They actually really believe in your product and, their values aligned. And so they're doing it because they really want to support you and see you succeed. It's going to be a bit of a needle in a haystack potentially, but definitely worth exploring.
And also, I think, coming from a bit more of a, a kind of public relations and marketing background, you also don't need to be necessarily looking for that one big influencer. The whole movement of micro influencers now is a really, really good way of kind of getting a message out there. And that's, maybe not as daunting as trying to approach someone that's on a big scale. I'm just conscious of the time. I'm being given the wrap-up sign. If everyone can possibly put their hands together to thank our panel guests. Thank you very much.